As promised, we are starting promptly at 11:30, and it is now 11:30. Many of you remember that Coach Dean Smith often said, if you're not early, you're late. So if you would find a seat, preferably one that's not occupied. There are those in the room who are here for the first time because they'll later in the program become members of the Old Students Club officially. But there are others who've long been members of the Old Students Club, and you're asking, where are all the others? This is the second Old Students Club luncheon we've done in the last 24 hours. So there was another group who participated yesterday, and that explains why it's a little more spacious in here today. To offer a blessing, I'm calling on David Huffman from the class of 1972.
Thank you, Doug. If I could ask us to turn down the ambient room noise for just a moment. Thank you. Let us pray. O gracious and loving God, from whom all blessings flow, and from whom all good gifts abound, we give you thanks, O God, for this wonderful day, for this wonderful university, for the wonderful memories we've made here together through the years. We are grateful for the farmers who have grown the food that we are going to eat, for those who have prepared it, for those who are serving it. Not least do we thank James Love for making it possible. God rest his soul. So we pray that this good food will nourish our bodies, give us good health, and that the fellowship around these tables will strengthen our resolve to be the people you've created us to be. People of character, people of love, people of service, as this great university helped teach us long ago. And I ask all who believe in the wonderful gift of gratitude to join me in saying, Amen.
Please continue to enjoy your lunch, but we're going to get started with the program. Some of you were together with us at the opening reception last night for the classes of 70 and 72, and when I was impromptu asked to say a couple of words, I reminded everybody that for almost 40 years I've carried a card in my pocket. On one side it says, remember, no one came to hear you speak. And on the other side it reads, blessed are the brief, for they shall be invited back. So you have in your program a rather lengthy description of our keynote speaker, Mr. Thomas Willis Lambeth. And I'm not going to regale you in all of what is already there, except to say he and I met on the second floor of Gardner Hall the fall semester of my sophomore year, because he was then with the H. Smith Richardson Foundation as they were launching at Carolina the Richardson Fellows Program. And by some stretch of good fortune, I survived that interview and went on to Chicopin, where the finalist decisions were made. And the Fellows Program for me became my equivalent of a fraternity, and there are some in the room who were in the first class of fellows, and Tom has been a close and dear friend for many, many years, and someone whose career path I've somewhat followed on Capitol Hill, and he got back to North Carolina from D.C. before I did. We're both glad we're no longer there. And you're going to be in for a treat in a few minutes. But in order for me to not have to get up again and introduce the two who will follow him, Bland Simpson will be responding, following on behalf of the class of 1970. And many in the class of 1970 may remember that Bland was actually our freshman class president, and enjoyed the experience so much that he decided that he would never engage in politics again. And interestingly, the person he defeated went on to become our student body president, Stuart Albright. Bland grew up in and around Elizabeth City, got his undergraduate degree from Carolina, went off to New York for a while to spend time songwriting, and came back and actually graduated in 1973 with a major in political science. He's a Keenan Distinguished Professor of English and Creative Writing. He's long been the piano player for the Red Clay Ramblers since 1986. His books include The Great Dismal, The Great Country, Ghost Ship of Diamond Shoals, The Coast of Carolina, Two Captains from the Carolina, Little Rivers and Waterway Tales, and his theatrical collaborations include Diamond Studs, Hot Grog, Life on the Mississippi, King Mackerel and the Blues Are Running, Cool Spring, Tar Heel Voices, Kudzu, and Full Moon. He's received any number of awards, including the North Carolina Humanities Council's John Tyler Caldwell Award in the Humanities, Carolina's Edward Kidder Graham Faculty Service Award, the General Alumni Association's Faculty Service Award. And coming to us from the class of 72, and just so you understand the importance that he has given this assignment, after a career of almost 40 years, last Sunday he retired. So we're really quite grateful, David, that you would make this such a priority. David was a religion major at UNC. He worked for 3 semesters as a teaching assistant to Bernie Boyd and accompanied him to Beersheba, Israel, for an archaeological excavation in the summers after he was finishing. He was Phi Beta Kappa here, also in Beta Theta Pi. He received a Master's of Divinity from Princeton Theological Seminary and studied at Harvard. And as I said, he was an ordained Presbyterian minister for 46 years. So if you would now give a warm Carolina Old Students Club welcome to Thomas Willis Lambeth. Tom?
Well, the truth is, I think maybe Doug did at some point say something to me about Keynote, and then I promptly forgot it. And I will tell you that that introduction and the talent that's going to follow me make me think about another great moment like this in my life when I was speaking to a Rotary Club in Greensboro. And just before I got up to speak, they announced that after the program that day, there would be a meeting of a special committee that they had set up to improve the quality of speakers at Rotary. Absolutely true. And I got up and thought that probably the best thing I could do would be to immediately sit down and say nothing, but I won't do that today. I'm here not because I am the oldest of the old students, although I may not be far from it. I remember sitting way back there and looking up here this is no longer true, by the way, 1970, don't worry about this, but where they used to put like 1939 and 1943, and I thought the other day, gee, when I look at this, the years that are going to be there isn't anything like that. And then I thought, well, you know, if somebody were here from the class of 1949, they would have to be 103, 104, something like that. And it made me think of one of those folks who did sit at that table for many years, Dr. Ted Blunt in Winston-Salem, who died some months ago. But Ted lived, I think, to 102. Doug called him on more than one birthday. The last time he had to delay his call to him because he was in the hospital getting over, I think, a broken hip, which he'd probably gotten chasing after one of his girlfriends in Winston-Salem. Not Doug, Ted. But I talked to Ted at 102. He was 102. It seemed to me like days, but maybe it was a week or so before he died. And I said, Ted, how are you? And he said, well, I feel pretty good. But he said, hell, it takes a committee to put my pants on in the morning. Which I think is one of the best descriptions of getting old, I know. But I'm here because someone ought to welcome those of you who now become a part of this annual gathering. The graduates of 19, who should have been recognized a couple of years ago, the class of 1970, the class of and something got in the way of that, which we all know about, and the class of 1972 who got us back on schedule. And then there are people who are from my generation, a few of us left, and other years who are now officially this year, if you've come before and you come again, you are old. And that's what we're here to talk about. There is something else special about this year which we can celebrate. We gather as North Carolina observes the 250th anniversary of the creation of the first college in our state, Salem College in Winston-Salem, which of all things 250 years ago was created for the education of women and girls. And by the way, it took us longer to get committed to the education of women and girls than it did those people in Salem. The one-time president of Salem, Howard Ronthaler, was also the president of the General Alumni Association, of which you all are a part. And the association and the college was created by women and men who had walked all the way to the Winston-Salem area, first to Bethabara, but to that area, walked all the way from Pennsylvania. It sort of makes Hinton James' trek here from what is Burgall seem like hardly a walk at all. This association has been around for 179 years, a long, long time, as an independent alumni association. You are the members largely of what is controlled by the direction election of most of its board and the management of its funds, an independent alumni association in a rather distinguished group of such associations in this country, ranging from the U.S. Military Academy and all the other service academies, I understand, to Georgia Tech, UNC, a very few. Enjoy that status. That doesn't mean that you exist in competition or opposition to the administration of the university or to those who govern it. For almost all of its history, the GAA has been a supporter of those who work in support of the university and of higher education in North Carolina generally. It is just more than a booster club, and that is very important. The number of national awards, especially those for our publication, the Alumni Review, attest to the excellence of the association you have created and that you, as its members, maintain. Let's never forget our strength as alumni. Carolina has several constituencies. We should never forget the citizens of North Carolina who own this university. Then there are the special constituencies who determine whether it is truly great. Students, faculty, administrators, and board. But you who are alumni are the one constant continuing group. In the 1880s, the GAA raised the dollars for the monument, as far as I know, still out there, to President Joseph Caldwell. And in the 1900s, for the building to honor President Edward Kidder Graham. It was the then leader of the GAA, Spike Saunders, who worked with Dr. Pogue, whose gift of over $2 million almost doubled the endowment of this university. And in 1952, the GAA joined with the leadership of the university in creating alumni annual giving. You raised over $12 million, with some help from others, over $12 million to build this building, and then gave it to the university as a gift. In recent years, almost $3 million from the GAA has endowed the two different scholarship programs, including the most recent one for military families. That is the measure of your association and its part in the Carolina story. Our individual Carolina stories are a part of a very special place, and yet the true strength here is not the hill, not the well, not the buildings, nor the trees, nor even the memories. It is in the commitment to be the university of the people. Those were the words of Charles Kuralt, who loved this place and now rests not far beyond where we sit, among trees that began centuries ago when the commitment was only a hope-filled promise. What is most compelling about this place and its story, and the story that all of us carry with us, is the extraordinary idea that Carolina represents, the idea born in the early hours of a new nation. That idea was that a state, a relatively poor state, could create a place of learning that would be both excellent and accessible. It wasn't true in the beginning, but it is truer now than ever before. And it is that idea and the lives of those who have served it, some of whom none of us will never know, of people who are not at this luncheon, but who are alumni of this place and have carried something inside them from this place that's made them do deeds that are in their own way great and significant and which they will never be recognized for. We think about them today. If those who do not love this place, and I've told some of you before about my friend who was named Bubba, who once told me after a particularly challenging athletic event that individually we folks from Carolina were the nicest people he'd ever known, that as a group we were the most incestuous group of SOBs he had ever encountered. But if those who do not love it were to prevail and close it down, if even the poplar were leveled and ground into sawdust, the idea would still be here, and we would build it once again. You can never kill the idea. You can never erase all the stories that are gathered around it. So go out today from all of the classes represented here, new old students and older old students. By the way, I'm sure there's somebody out there who has said, as I've heard every year, how awful that name, old students, is. And immediately when reminded that lunch is free because of the original donor and presumably will be free forever, old doesn't seem to sound quite as bad. Go out bound together in your love for the university, and go out determined to make it the university of all the people, of those who love it and those who do not. Remember that has always been its promise, even as the promise took on new meaning and confronted new challenges. You and the more than 300,000 others who are not with us today, but who share your place in the Carolina family. Hark the sound.
My friends, first, I want to say I honor Tom Lambeth with my deepest convictions, for he has carried the progressive spirits of Frank Porter Graham, Terry Sanford, William Friday, and many others forward through his entire life, and in so doing, has inspired us all to make the university and the state it serves better, always and without end, better. We love you, Tom. Thank you, Doug, for inviting me to testify just a little bit about what Carolina has meant to me. Call up a few memories I hope will resonate with you all, while first owning up to the fact that my long association with UNC and Chapel Hill began at Duke. My father had just finished law school at UNC as a member of the vaunted class of 1948, and my parents, living in a cottage just off East Franklin Street, awaited my mid-October arrival. At that time, one went to Durham to be born in a hospital, and the legendary Daddy Ross at Duke brought me into the world, and all was well, till a Duke nurse looked in on my mother as she cradled me and remarked, "Boy, that sure is one ugly baby." I was short on English at the moment, but I could and did say to that nurse, "I zigga Zumba, Zumba, Zumba," while Mama packed hastily, checked out at Duke and got us back to Chapel Hill to the cottage in 20 minutes flat. 11 years later, in the summer of 1959, my family moved back to Chapel Hill from Elizabeth City. Sonny Jim Tatum, the great Carolina football coach, died of Rocky Mountain spotted fever a month later. And I vividly remember the great mourning, the sense of a whole community in grief, and how much Carolina and Chapel Hill were interwoven. My friends and I roamed all over the place freely. We played tennis on the clay courts between the old Chapel Hill Cemetery and Cobb Dorm. We drank limeades made fresh in the circus room, where Carl Betcher's animal carvings, done from William Meade Prince's illustration, now right outside this room, originally were mounted. We learned to swim in the Bowman Gray Pool and the Kessing Pool. We shot baskets in the Tin Can and Woolen Jim. Never had we heard anything louder than the incredible noise made by 5,000 people packed into Woolen Jim to see Carolina face Duke or State or Wake. There I once spotted Joe Quigg from the 1957 championship team and got his autograph. There I watched York Larice's incredible two-hand set shots, an archaic, flat-footed thing of beauty from a different era, a different game, and still a joy forever. We graduated from Chapel Hill High School in June 1966 in Memorial Hall. I took a check my father gave me very early the next morning and went up to campus and enrolled by 8 a.m. for my first class at the university. Modern civilization. with Paul Jan Pinckney. That was a short trip, 12 hours from high school graduation to matriculation at Carolina, and all I did was step over a stone wall. Yet there was a very great deal more to it than that. I entered the brave new world of Carolina that I've never left. A second-year history honors course with Elizabeth Nathans steered me into research and writing, and my passionate interest in politics veered away from student government and toward the dialectic and philanthropic societies, the Daily Tar Heel, where I became a columnist and night editor. What incredible teachers we had. In addition to Professor Nathans, I had classes with Rule Tyson in religious studies, Lou Lipsitz, the poet professor, and Andy Scott and Earl Wallace in political science, Walter Spearman in journalism, who mesmerized us with his ever-lengthening cigarette ash, while gently yet clearly criticizing our editorial writings. Don Matthews on social movements, Joel Williamson on the Old South, Herbert Bodman on the Middle East, Jake Mills, the Renaissance scholar and teller of Carolina tales afield and afloat, Tom Stumpf in English, who taught the Old Testament as literature, and Dennis Donovan there, who, as he taught, literally acted out Paradise Lost. We held Halloween midnight rites at the Dian Phi plots in the old Chapel Hill Cemetery. We talked politics and music at Harry's Restaurant next to the post office. We talked politics and music at the Tempo Room down the street. We talked politics and music at the Carolina Political Union, Eric Van Loon and David Keel and Jed Dietz leading the way. We put the Daily Tar Heel together on the top floor of Graham Memorial. And we bought and read the artful Little Bolero literary magazine in Wycourt. What an exciting day it was to move into Old East, the top floor, North Tower, number 36. I learned at the housing office that this had once been Thomas Wolfe's room. And when all the various suite mates, there were 4 double rooms and 1 single on each floor, on each tower, when all the suite mates gathered to meet up that first night, at some point I let it slip about being in Thomas Wolfe's room. That nearly started a riot. Turned out that everyone living in Old East had been informed by the housing office that his room was Thomas Wolfe's room. That fall of 1968, we listened to Robbie Robertson's songs on the band's first album, Music from Big Pink. So much so that I decided to make a pilgrimage to Woodstock, New York, to see the band and their great ally, Bob Dylan. I hitchhiked all the way up there in the icy pre-Christmas cold of 1968, stood on a log cabin front porch, conversing familiarly with Dylan for much of an hour, an encouraging encounter that ultimately led me to New York City during spring break of 1969 and to a songwriting contract. And then, suddenly, it seemed I was done with Carolina and Chapel Hill. I was a resident of Manhattan's Upper West Side before Labor Day of 1969. An incredible swirl for me, throwing myself into city life, writing songs, in and out of recording studios, hearing some of the great folk, jazz, and blues musicians close up in the village clubs, Odetta, Tom Paxton, Ramblin' Jack Elliott, Tim Hardin, Mose Allison, finding new collaborators from Juilliard, from Columbia, and recording an album for Columbia Records. New York was overwhelming, yet overwhelmingly good to me from the start. Yet a trip from the Upper West Side to the Union Grove Fiddlers Convention by way of Chapel Hill at Eastertide convinced me to come home and keep following music in a warmer and less expensive latitude. Back here, I was fortunate to team up with some great Carolina class of 70 and thereabouts musical friends, Jim Wan, John Foley, Mike Sheehan, Jan Davidson, and our ensemble, the Southern States Fidelity Choir, soon made an even bigger team with a UNC philosophy prof named Tommy Thompson and his brand new band, the Red Clay Ramblers, and with more Carolina support, Buck and Kay Goldstein and their dining room table to work out a script, and John Haber to direct it. We forged the show Diamond Studs, staged it boisterously in the Rococo Red banquet room of the Ranch House in October 1974, moved straight to Manhattan, where in January 1975, Studs was a hit. Musicians Theater was born, and we were in it for good. This Carolina-centric movement gave us, ultimately, the individual and collective strength to carry a very joyous music all over North America, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. And then some more Carolina magic blessed me. Max Steele, longtime director of creative writing here, asked me if I'd like to teach, initially for a semester, spring of 1982. Sign me up, I said. And what has steadily deepened over these 40 years of working with undergraduates at Carolina has been my understanding of how much more than editorial advice the teaching of writing called for and was all about. Beyond the reading of classic texts and the workshopping of original manuscripts, this endeavor involves empathy, encouragement, and all manner of advice and counsel, both in and outside of the classroom. As young writers seek not only to develop and expand their literary skills, but also simultaneously to come to terms with the great central aspirations of their lives. To have been on this beautiful campus, to have witnessed and worked with so much new talent and with such cherished colleagues, to have stayed in touch with so many students well after their graduations, what a terrific honor and a deep, abiding pleasure. Now, nothing I have done pleased my late mother more than my association with Carolina as an English teacher. And yet one little matter kept bothering her, a particular detail that would show up in newspaper feature stories about my work here or the Red Clay Ramblers or whatever show we were working on, and that was haunting birthplace information, noting that I was from Durham or a Durham native, resulting in immediate calls to me from my mother, "Is this the Durham songwriter?" Or, "May I speak with the Durham native?" And then she would ask me, "Why don't you tell them you were born in Chapel Hill?" I would if I had been, Mama, but my mother taught me to tell the truth. This went on for years, till finally her exasperation one evening reached fever pitch. I had just answered the "Why do you tell them you were born in Durham?" and then I heard this, all right, you were born in Durham. You were born in Durham. You were born in Durham, but you were conceived in Chapel Hill." Conceived in Chapel Hill. In so many ways, so were we all. Many, many of us can point to good fortune in arts and letters, in business, academia, medicine, entrepreneurship, and indeed in life that have come our ways and that are surely and intimately bound up with Carolina, with our teachers, our longtime friends, and our partners for life, all found here in the province of our soul mother, our alma mater. To keep repaying our extraordinary debts to this wondrous place, we must keep helping North Carolina as it strives towards true health in every area, social, environmental, medical, you name it. by giving our beloved state and our nation the university's visionary leadership at full strength now more than ever. And to provide that leadership and vision, to take fullest advantage of Carolina's great convening and health-giving and outreaching capabilities, I know that we will all tell her story and sing her song for as long as we live. God bless you all, and God bless the university and the love of free inquiry and art and knowledge for which she stands. Hark the sound.
Well, those are hard acts to follow. Thank you, Tom. And Bland, I told Bland I've been a fan of his for many years, and I'm delighted to be able to meet him today and to have lunch next to him. And I've been a fan of his work, his music and his writing, and his theatrical exploits. I also want to thank you, Doug, for the wonderful job you've done for these many years as in your position over the Alumni Association. I always look forward to getting that publication and reading your speech at the end of it. Thank you for that service. And I wish to thank our Chancellor, faculty, staff, and the Board of Trustees for keeping our dear alma mater in such fine shape. Not least, I'd like to thank James Love for the first free lunch I've had in Chapel Hill. Little did I know when I was walking across Polk Place in September of 1968 on my way to freshman English class in Bingham Hall that I'd be standing before you today. When I look back over my life, I am just astounded by how much grace I have received from so many wise and kind and thoughtful and loving professors and teachers and parents and extended family, and not least among parishioners I have been blessed to serve for several decades. I want to thank Lee Hood. Lee Hood has a way of scheduling his day that he doesn't show up at all the appointments. His name card's right next to me. Lee, are you here? There you are. He's amongst. He's a very modest man who wanted to be amongst his fellow classmates in class of 72. Also like to thank the members of our 1972 reunion planning committee. Thanks to Lee's organizational skills, we have met every 2 weeks since July, and we've managed to squeeze 1 hour of business into a 2-hour Zoom call every time. So, when I look over this vast room, we've come a long way from Lenore Hall. I'm amazed. What is that on the back wall there? Is that a tapestry? It is. Gosh, I thought it was an enormous fireplace, but okay. When I look over this room, I'm reminded of what President Kennedy told a gathering of Nobel Prize winners from the Western Hemisphere, for whom he and Jackie had thrown a dinner in their honor in the White House. He said, "This is the most extraordinary collection of talent and knowledge that has ever gathered at this White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined here alone." So pat yourself on the back. You look pretty good. You know, some of you know Arthur Gordon, who started Irregardless Cafe in Raleigh because an English teacher he crossed through the use of that word in a term paper, and so he created a restaurant by that name, and he said it's a proper name now, so it's legit. Some of you have eaten there through the years. He sold it last year. He would always come over to the table in recent years and say, you know, there are really only 3 stages in life. There's youth, there's middle age, and then there's you look good. So if nobody has told you that yet today, you look good. It's great to be here, isn't it? One of the reasons I'm happy to be here today is to share with you what I've recently learned about the history of the founding of this great university. I've just completed a book about the early days of our school and discovered that the founding was essentially a Presbyterian conspiracy to educate the citizens of North Carolina. You didn't know that, did you? In 1776, the North Carolina Constitution contained a provision for a state university to be created, but they didn't do it. So in 1784, the Reverend Samuel Eusebius Mccorkle, pastor of Thyatira Presbyterian Church 10 miles outside of Salisbury, introduced a bill, a real actual bill in the General Assembly to formally establish a university. But it failed. 5 years later, William R. Davie, another Presbyterian, introduced a bill which did pass, for which he has a tree and a building named after him. Did you know that most of the first professors and administrators here were Presbyterian ministers who also served simultaneously as the minister of Chapel Hill Presbyterian Church? Most of them had studied with the Reverend John Witherspoon, signer of the Declaration of Independence, a Presbyterian minister and president of Princeton College, then called the College of New Jersey. Reverend Mccorkle founded an academy in Salisbury after Davie's bill passed in order to prepare students for admission here. In the first graduating class, there were only 8 graduates. I assume Hinton James was in that. I don't know if he passed all his courses or not. But 7 of those 8 were graduates of McCorkle's academy in Salisbury. McCorkle was a member of the first Board of Trustees. If you go to the post office downtown, you'll see that wonderful WPA mural hanging on the wall there. Davie's up front with the trowel, but McCorkle's right behind him with a speech in hand. He gave the speech that day. He would have been the first presiding professor. They didn't call him president initially, but Davies voted against him. They did, however, name the first quadrangle after him. So if you love our great university, and I know you do, you can thank the Presbyterians for playing such a large role in creating it. You're welcome. I wish I could see on the back row. In my church, you have to come early to get a seat on the back row. But we didn't come here today to talk about ancient history. We came here to relive fond memories of this wonderful place that has insinuated itself into our soul. How can any one of us walk across McCorkle Place or Polk Place or down Franklin Street without thinking about, with deep appreciation, the learned and committed professors who taught us here? People like Bernard Boyd and Rule Tyson, Bill Peck, John Dixon, Art Benevie, who just passed away 2 weeks ago at the age of 95. What a marvelous teacher he was. Earl Wallace, General Unks, or Bill Gear, who taught me modern civilization. On the 6th floor in the parlor, gathering room there of, where did I live my first year? Granville West. And who can forget Dr. Jicka in chemistry, who may hold the record for flunking the most students in freshman chemistry. And for some of you older graduates here, people like Paul Green, Hugh Leffler, Walter Spearman, Dr. Coker. We were also blessed by many legendary committed administrators like Frank Porter Graham, William Friday, Robert House, and Carlisle Sitterson. We could go on and on. So yes, we are numbered today among a great cloud of witnesses. I suspect that you also carry some very fond memories from this place in the extracurricular category. Watching Don McCauley set records in Kenan Stadium, or Charlie Scott break records in Carmichael, or marching in the Beat Duke parade on Franklin Street, or competing in those inimitable chariot races, or singing along with James Taylor, Joe Cocker, Chuck Berry, B.B. King, and others at Jubilee. It was so good they had to cancel it. Never figured that out. Or listening to Norman Mailer or Ralph Nader or Jane Fonda and Tom Wicker in Memorial Hall. or those tasty yeast rolls at the porthole, or those chewy, elongated strips of steak called gamblers at Zoom Zoom and the Ratskeller, or eating meatloaf and potatoes to Mozart and Beethoven at the Carolina Coffee Shop. Did you know that was the first post office here on the campus, that building? Or those wonderful late night runs to Roy Rogers, Hardee's, or Hector's, famous since 1969. Remember that was the sign it opened with, you know. Yes, we were mightily blessed to walk many miles across this beautiful campus and to learn about this wonderful world of ours. This was an eye-opening experience for us. Most of us came from small North Carolina towns, and we had a very narrow window on the world. Here it got larger and larger and larger. A great debate has always surrounded the primary mission of a university. Is it mainly to train us for a profession or a vocation, to make a living in the world, or is it to produce educated people? At the end of every commencement at Harvard University, the president says to the graduating class, "Welcome to the company of educated people." I think our university seal gives us a clue. Lux and libertas. Now, for those of you who didn't take Latin, that's light and liberty. The Latin word for educate is educare, which means to lead out of the darkness of ignorance, prejudice, fear, and small thinking, into the light of wisdom, understanding, character, civility, integrity, and magnanimity, largeness of heart. The liberal arts, when you think about it, in the best sense of that phrase, they liberate us from the forces of darkness into the light of day. Our founders had a vision for this university to prepare students to become good citizens in this great democratic republic of ours, serving the common good and promoting the general welfare. When Benjamin Franklin walked out of Independence Hall on July the 4th, 1776, a bystander shouted out, "Well, doctor, what do we have, a monarchy or a republic?" Franklin replied, "We have ourselves a republic, if you can hold it." No one then really was very sure that that was going to be a possibility. This was a grand experiment. Not least Franklin, who I think meant what he said. He also believed that morality and civility were the only things that would make it work and cohere. The reason our university became great was because its mission was to educate us and instill in us a strong sense of public service. Sadly, this vision is under attack these days by short-sighted political and business interests. Let us pray, no, let us work diligently to prevent these forces from overshadowing the lux and the liberty, the lux and libertas, the light and the liberty that still emblazon our university seal. Long live the vision of Davy and McCorkle and Caldwell and Chapman and Battle and Graham and all the others who left us such a great legacy. And God help us if we cannot hold it. Hark the sound. Go Tar Heels. God bless you, everyone. I am proud to be a fellow student and alum of this place. Thank you for the privilege. I'm amazed that I'm here.
David, Bland, Tom, on behalf of all of us, thank you for those thoughtful and inspiring words. We're very grateful. Now the moment has come that I know all of you have been waiting for, and that is the announcement that before you leave here, you must, table by table, determine who leaves with the centerpiece. That's actually very true. And we hope it doesn't result in a less enjoyable weekend. Certainly no food fights. At this moment, I'd like to ask all the members of the planning committee for the class of 1970 who are present to join our president, Charles Ingram, and stand, please. Please, no. Remain standing, please. Now, will all members of the class of 1970 who are present, please stand and remain standing. You've waited. You have waited too long. It is now my pleasure to assure you that when you return in the future, you will never again be seated as close to the stage as you are today. You may be seated. Now, if Lee Hood Capps and the rest of the steering committee for the class of 72 would please stand. And if you would remain standing as your classmates join you, all the others in the class of 72, please. And in the future, when you attend, wherever you find the class of 70, you'll be behind them. Please be seated. Now, when you picked up your registration, you should have found your certificate authenticating you as members of the Old Students Club. In the event that you did not, and that's always possible, please check out at the registration desk and we will be delighted to provide you such a certificate. At 1:30, the next enrichment program will begin in the Blue Zone. And for those of you who may have skipped it or missed it, this will be moderated by class of 1970 classmate Jim Delaney, and it'll be a panel that will include Charlie Scott, Eddie Fogler, Bill Chambers, Bill Chamberlain, and I believe Jim is endeavoring to get Coach Williams to join them as well. So that will begin at 1:30. Those of you who didn't register but have interest in participating in Jubilee on this evening can check at the registration desk. Now, a very important message to the class of 70 and 72. If you were here and you had not committed to processing tomorrow into Keenan Stadium with your classmates, what did I say? Tomorrow is Saturday. Oh, we have a full day tomorrow. Okay. Sunday. You can see I'm ready for the Old Students Club. If you have not committed, then you are about to make one of the great mistakes of your life. And so don't wait any longer. We do have regalia, and we will be delighted to add you, but do let the folks at the registration desk know. With that, this is the moment that we all stand, those of us who are able, and we sing our own favorite song. And those who wish to sway may sway, preferably with someone with whom you'd like to sway. And absolutely sway in such a way that you'll remain vertical. And as always, you may end this song with your own favorite word. And this year you could do it twice, given. Hark the sound of Tar Heel voices ringing clear and true, singing Carolina's praises, shouting NCU. Hail to the brightest star of all, clear its radiant shine, dun 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 dun. Carolina, priceless gem, receive all praises thine. For I'm a Tar Heel born, I'm a Tar Heel bred. When I die, I'm a Tar Heel dead. So it's rah-rah, Carolina, Lina, rah-rah, Carolina, Lina, rah-rah, Carolina, rah, rah, rah. Remember those centerpieces.